Hello and Happy New Year, and welcome back to the Beyond Biotech podcast, the first of 2023, and this is number 28. I'm Jim Cornell from Labiotech, and I hope you had a great holiday, and if you get gifts, I really hope the best gift wasn't not listening to me for 2 weeks. I also wondered whether or not I should just keep going with the numbers of the podcast, or do what some do and have a volume 2 for the second year and start over, but I think I prefer just single numbers. Podcast 100 does sound, to me, a lot better than Podcast Volume 3, Number 11. I was pleasantly surprised this week that there is actually quite a lot of news. I do remember being editor of a newspaper when the time between Christmas and about January the 10th was just completely dead, and we ran things that you would never cover at any other time of the year. So there's already a ton of biotech news coming in, and that's good. I've also been busy sprucing up the events page. I've added lots, although I'm nowhere near finished yet. There are plenty that I'd like to go to this year, but probably won't get to. But I am off on an overnighter to Belfast in Northern Ireland next week, which I'm looking forward to. Although the weather isn't supposed to be that great, but no change there then. Amazingly, my holiday job of Lego Piece Finder was extended by a week, as there's a train that still isn't finished. I'm not really sure why I took the job, as the pay is non-existent. Because we're still easing our way back into 2023, just 2 interviews this week. I mentioned how there's already been a lot of biotech news, and one big contributing factor is the JP Morgan Healthcare event in San Francisco. But of course, that's not the only gig in town, as they say. There are lots of other biotech events in San Francisco next week as well, and so it's going to be a very busy place. We have interviews with 2 companies this week that will be in San Francisco next week, and they are Newron, and we had a conversation with the company's CEO, Stefan Weber, and the other company is Mainz Biomed, and we chatted with the CEO, Guido Bächler. So now it's time for the news that you may have missed over at Labiotech.eu. Not quite so many this week because we were only back on Tuesday. Blacksmith Medicines is merging with Forge Therapeutics. We uploaded some more videos and updated the events and editorial calendar pages. We had a JPM Week event guide from BIO and Novateur Ventures. Newron announced interim results from its treatment-resistant schizophrenia trial, which you'll hear about in the interviews. And Legend Biotech had its new drug application approved in China. Adimune has been created to focus on immune modulation therapies. Infex's novel AMR drug candidate MET-X received FDA QIDP designation, and Novozymes invested in new energy-saving UV technology. Hummingbird Bioscience and Synaffix are set to develop an ADC program. Cancer Research UK and Turbine are partnering on a new program, and researchers have discovered a new type of CRISPR gene scissors. Navignostics is mapping tumour proteomes to improve precision oncology. BioNTech is partnering with the UK government on personalised mRNA cancer immunotherapies, and you can read all of these and plenty more at Labiotech.eu. As I mentioned earlier, I'm in the middle of updating events for 2023, and it's good that there are so many of them. The other page I updated this week was our editorial calendar. We have a special newsletter on a specific subject each month, and so I rounded out the content for 2023. So if you have a contribution for those newsletters, or you're interested in sponsoring one, then please check the editorial calendar at Labiotech.eu. You can also subscribe to our newsletters there, and they're completely free. And so with that plug over for our website, that brings us to the first of this week's interviews. And as I mentioned, both of the guests today will be in San Francisco next week, as will many others in the biotech world. I've lost count of the number of press releases from companies that are going to be there. Both of the companies that we're talking to today also have recent news, and the first up is Mainz Biomed. We spoke with the company's CEO, Guido Bächler, and I first asked for a little background on the company.
So Jim, Mainz is, we're based in Mainz, Germany. We went public a little bit over a year ago, and the main focus of the company is early detection of cancer, or even before that. So our main focus today is colorectal cancer. We have a product launched in Germany about a year and a half ago called ColoAlert, that is focusing on early detection of colorectal cancer. And it's a combination of a fecal occult blood test with DNA markers, which are very specialized in detecting actually early stage of cancer. So that's, as a company, our vision. We announced last year, we licensed new mRNA biomarkers, which are actually have been proven by the University of Sherbrooke in Canada that they can actually identify even precancerous lesions of colorectal cancer, which is very important and part of our mission to not just become the leader in being the focusing colorectal cancer for early detection of cancer, let's say stage 1, but even before that we can actually identify precancerous lesions. Then they can be removed during colonoscopy and the patient never goes into a colorectal cancer stage. So that's the passion, that's the vision of the company. Based in Germany, we're around 60 people. We went public a year ago, did a follow-on raise in January, and now we're focusing on commercialization of our product in Europe, as well as some of the clinical studies that I'm sure we'll have time to talk about it today as well, that we initiated in Europe as well in the US to ultimately get our colorectal cancer product as well approved by the FDA in the US.
You were mentioning this for the early detection and even before cancer. How would somebody know that they are in danger of getting colorectal cancer?
So I think in general, there are screening guidelines in many countries around the world. The US, for example, has age 45, Germany age 50, where you're supposed to do a regular screening for colorectal cancer because colorectal cancer, if early detected, has a very high survival rate. We're over 90% if it's detected at stage 1. The problem is a lot of people don't necessarily do it because colonoscopies, which is the gold standard, is pretty tedious to perform. And so in our case, we are working with guidelines that people, individuals who are in that age group actually test. Our test is a very simple stool test. You can do it at home in your privacy. Very simple, small collection, and then you can drop our tubes that you have in a mailbox, and then you get the results shipped back to you within a short period. So it is really an education part that we need to do and are doing with patients, but also with physicians to encourage the patient to do that regular, right? We propose our test to be done every third year to be able to identify if our test is positive, Jim, then you should go in and do a colonoscopy. And maybe this is a good time to talk about a case study that we have. We had a woman in Germany. She had already 2 little kids, and she was relatively young. She had 2 kids and was pregnant with her third. When she started realizing that something just isn't right. She wasn't gaining as much. She just felt that pregnancy is different than the first 2. So she went to her primary care doctor and physicians and shared with them her concern. And she was basically told not to worry about it, that she's actually okay and it's just normal. She didn't take that as an answer because she wanted to be in control of her health. She came across our test, the ColoAlert, that we are offering also online in Germany. She ordered the test and the test came back positive. So what that meant is that something wasn't right, something that we identified specific biomarkers that highlighted that she could have colorectal cancer. Physician then took the results and ordered a colonoscopy. And unfortunately for her, she was positive. So they found cancerous lesions in her stool and in her colon, were able to remove it. And then she had to go on to therapy. She wrote us a letter a couple of months ago, thanking us for not just, offering the test, but that first of all, she was able to now be treated much more aggressively earlier. So her survival rate is much bigger. But on top of it, she was able to, have a higher chance of actually growing up and be the mother of her children. And she just 3 weeks ago actually delivered a beautiful boy. So we're very happy for her. We have a continued relationship. But that, Jim, that's what we do, right? So it's this unknown. We do a lot of, we tell people, this is not a big test, right? So just do the test on a regular basis. And because the survival rate is high, and now with the new markers that we're going to add in, even pre-cancer, so you don't even have cancer. So it's really, it's the story of our company. And we're also, moving into the area of pancreatic cancer, where we have done some research as well, which is another cancer. It's dissimilar to a colorectal, right? Because pancreatic cancer is almost always identified at a very late stage. and the survival rate is very high. So here as well, we're working with research organizations and universities to find better biomarkers to identify pancreatic cancer at an early stage.
You've got a couple of studies ongoing right now. You've got the early detect and also the reconnaissance.
Reconnaissance, yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell me a little bit about both of those?
Yes, there's also Call of Future, Jim. So the first study that we started off last year was Call of Future, and that is a multi-center study in Europe, Norway, and Germany. And the purpose of that study, Jim, was now to, as I mentioned earlier, we licensed the mRNA biomarker from University of Sherbrooke in Canada. And they showed in their study that they have a very, very high sensitivity for identifying these precancerous lesions or advanced adenomas. The Call of Future now incorporated those 5 mRNA biomarkers with the current product Colo Alert. So what we're actually doing is we're enrolling patients at average risk, as well as some with potential risk, and then be testing them with the mRNA, our DNA, and FIT. So it's a multi-marker panel that we're testing to show that we can actually even more increase our performance of our current test by adding this mRNA, but even more important, going to the precancerous lesions. So that's Call of Future. We then added Early Detect the end of last year to add an American arm, right? So because the Call of Future is focused on Europe, and we wanted to get an American population as well into our study. So that's why Early Detect was done. Again, we're running that through an independent research organizations in the US. And so those are kind of pivotal studies for us for the reconnaissance, which is really our big FDA study. And one of the core activities we did last year, Jim, was really understanding what are the requirements to get our product approved by the FDA. We also had some initial discussions with CMS, which is responsible for the reimbursement. And so we now, as part of the discussion, developed our protocol for reconnaissance, which is available, clinicaltrials.gov, that outlines the study we'll do. And that study is a large, looking at about 15,000 patients, all average at average risk patients, which means none of those patients will have any symptoms, to ultimately get a claim from the FDA for, again, average at risk. So people from 45 to 75 who are in the age to get screened can then use our test to get screened. So those are the 3 studies, and Call of Future and Early Detect are really kind of pre-studies for the reconnaissance, which then is actually really the ultimate regulatory study that we need to do for FDA approval.
You mentioned about getting the word out about your products. Is it easy to convince physicians and people that they should be doing these tests?
I wouldn't say it's easy. It's an effort it takes, because we have a good program already ongoing in Europe, where we basically educate patients, we educate physicians. What's good about our test, Jim, is there's the most used test today globally is the fecal occult blood test. So this is basically a small stool test where they measure whether you have any blood in your stool, and that's a good test, but it's not very sensitive because it only detects bleeding cancers. So what we did, our Colo Alert and also the future product now, again expanding into the mRNA, will really increase the sensitivity. And that's the story to our physicians and patients, right? We're not replacing something that's already being used in many actually national screening guidelines in Europe, but we're making that screening test better by adding these additional components, the DNA and the mRNA, to actually identify cancer earlier, and even adding the precancerous lesions. So it's an ongoing education process, Jim. It takes time. It takes time to get into guidelines, but I think we have the right team within Mainz Biomed and the right advisor to really be successful with these programs.
Sure. I would imagine as well that in terms of finances, it's probably more important to be able to find things early rather than treat things, in terms of, especially in the US with the way the healthcare system works there, it's probably a massive saving to be able to treat people early.
Absolutely. And so again, I mentioned before, the survival rate is already very high, stage 1. And so as you can imagine, the cost gets more expensive as you go further down stage. But if you can eliminate somebody from having cancer, you have no cost, right? So that's really the holy grail of what we're trying to do. And what's also very clear, I think there's more and more data coming out that you probably also have heard from other companies that use blood for screening of colorectal cancer. They certainly have good results for certain levels of colorectal cancer screening, but they're absolutely struggling to get to the early stage with advanced adenomas, because they're just not yet measurable in the bloodstream. They're just too early. And so that's a big part for us, right? As we think about the health economics we're doing, we also have health economic studies prepared that can show that, if you detect somebody that amount earlier, right, looking at the overall treatment costs, how much money you can save. And of course, if you go even a step before and you don't even have cancer, then the cost savings are very significant.
Absolutely. San Francisco is going to be the hub of the biotech world in the next little while with JP Morgan and all of the associated events. Are you participating in that? And if so, what kind of results are you looking for?
Yeah, so as we are a very young company, Jim, right? So it is really more awareness as well, where we have lots of meetings with potential investors and potential partners, strategic partners that are interested in what we're doing. As you can imagine, this is the market opportunity for this product is very, very massive, in US and also in Europe. And what's nice about us, what people like about our company is, Jim, that we already have a product, right? So we're already selling a product in Europe. We get very good feedback. We're ramping this up. And as we also recently announced, we're moving a little bit more also in Europe into corporate health. There's a lot of opportunities that we're exploring with this product. And I think that's one of the stories next week, right? So really is reconnecting and introducing Mainz also to the bigger institutional investors and really talk about who we are, talk about our milestones for next year, right? So when you look at what we accomplished, and we just did this release this week, talked a little bit about all the things we've done last year. It was a tremendous year for us of all the progress the team has done. And we're looking forward to continue to drive that progress forward in 23 with creating the data, which kind of links us to the discussion before, Jim. Really, the goal of next year really is to develop and show the mRNA data in combination with our Colo Alert test. Again, the early detect is the first result we're expecting to come out, and then continue to drive the commercialization of our product in Europe with expanding our partnerships, and then also the initiation of our reconnaissance study in the US to really get on track with the FDA submission.
You mentioned some of the results in 23. Are there any other things that you're looking forward to over the next 12 months? Obviously, there's already quite a lot going on, but...
Yeah, no, it is, again, Jim, it is continuation of what was started last year, post-IPO and post the secondary raise. It was really building the team. So we built a great team last year. That will, as we say, it's the right people on the bus. We know where to go with it. So we're really driving this forward in 23, again, with the commercialization of the three business pillars. So one is clearly the lab business that continue to expand, selling our products to laboratories in Germany and outside of Germany. We'll certainly expand into other countries in Europe next year, it's this year now. And then the clinical data, again, we're very excited about, the coming data from the early detect, as well as then Colo Future next year. And then the initiation of our reconnaissance, our FDA study. So those are the three ones. We'll also, of course, will further progress on the pancreatic cancer project. That's another one that is ongoing. And we will update the investment community as those data points come available.
Next, it's to the Italian company Newron. They will also be out in San Francisco, and we will find out why from the Newron CEO, Stefan Weber. But of course, first, it's the obligatory question to find out a little bit about the company.
Yes, Newron goes back to a small biotech spin-out at a time when Pharmitalia Carlo Erba was acquired by Pharmacia. And that was in the mid-90s. And the new owners decided after a while to close down the research that was done at the Milan site for CNS diseases, so diseases of the central nervous system. They offered to those people, the key researchers, to move to Kalamazoo, Michigan. And you might know that an Italian being offered to move to Kalamazoo, Michigan is not really a dreamlike scenario. So those guys decided to start a business instead. And they were one of the first biotech spin-outs in Italy at the time, funded by VC money. So they not only took the team, but they also took a very early preclinical compound, which at that time was called safinamide. And that was intended, given its mechanism of action, to go into epilepsy. And what those chaps who founded Newron in 99, but effectively incorporated it in 2000, they did all the preclinical work, and they raised the money, and they did some clinical work, and they found the drug worked in epilepsy. But they did then do a competitive analysis, and they said, well, in epilepsy, we might be one of plenty compounds, highly competitive, very expensive to develop. But given the mechanism of action, which has a glutamatergic component in it, might be much better to take this drug into Parkinson's disease. And that is exactly what they did. And they went on to raise additional money, did phase 2 studies. Then in 2005, they decided to have new management levels. So the C-level, chief executive, chief medical, chief financial officer. And that is how Ravi Anand, as chief medical officer, and myself as CFO, joined the company at that year. And we had Rolf Stahl, the former CEO of Shire, being the chairman of the company. And we then, within a year's time, produced the first phase 3 results with that compound, safinamide, in Parkinson's disease. And we then did a public offering, and we succeeded with one of the top 3 biotech IPOs of the year 2006. We raised $100 million, which was really an exciting thing at the time. And we had Morgan Stanley and at the time Lehman Brothers being the lead banks of that IPO syndicate. So we had a pretty good start, and then we took on additional compounds. It took us a number of years before we then got our Parkinson's drug really on the market. It was approved in the European Union in 2015 and in the United States in 2017, and it is globally licensed today. So with all that money raised during that time and with the drug news flow on safinamide, we were able to build a pipeline of 3 compounds. And we were able to develop the second compound, evenamide, schizophrenia, to where it is today, again, a phase 3 compound. So that is the history and the background of the company. We are still a very small entity. We are only 24 FTEs in Milan headquarters and in Morristown, New Jersey, where we have our commercial team, we have the CMC, and we have part of our development team. So a small, virtual, highly effective team at any time able to run 2 or 3 phase 2 or phase 3 studies in parallel. That's who Newron is, fully focused on diseases of the central nervous system.
I guess the latest news that just came out this week was about the treatment-resistant schizophrenia trials. I wonder if you could tell me about that, because in the information it seems there's mention of compelling new results. So could you explain a bit of that?
Yeah, that's absolutely thrilling. You need to know, Jim, that schizophrenia is a disease that affects 1% of the population globally. And we have some 30 drugs that are approved for treatment of schizophrenia, which are all going back to the same mechanism of action, which is all about 2 neurotransmitters in the brain, about dopamine and serotonin. So all these drugs do more or less the same, which is kind of boring because we have not seen any true innovation in schizophrenia for decades. And within that 1% of the population, you have between 30 to 50% of patients. There's a lot of gray zone between the 30 and the 50. But you could at any time say that 30% of the patients do not respond at all to today's medication from the very beginning of the disease. And that starts early on at age 18. It's a lifelong disease. And the rest of those patients will become treatment resistant to today's medication after going through different cycles, numbers of years being treated with those medications. So they have some benefit to most patients initially, but as patients go down into the disease for 5 years and more, about every 18 months, patients will have to switch their medication because of either terrible side effects like a pound weight gain per week, sexual dysfunction, or hormonal changes, or because the drug simply starts losing the benefits. So we are developing our compound, evenamide, for both those indications. Those patients who are starting to lose the benefits of their current medication, who are desperately looking for an alternative treatment that is not within the same class of compounds, And we are developing our compound for those patients who are already completely treatment resistant, either from the beginning or after many, many years of being treated with today's drugs. And so what we reported yesterday, that was the results after 6 months of the first 100 patients who were treatment resistant and now for the first time being given evenamide, our drug, on top of whatever else they were taking. And we were absolutely struck by the size of the benefits that we had seen. We had already disclosed in June of last year the results in those patients after 6 weeks, and we thought they were encouraging. But now after 6 months, what we had hoped would be that we could maintain those benefits for that longer period of time. What we saw instead was another substantial and statistically significant improvement of those patients over all the efficacy endpoints, regardless of what we looked at. And that is really, and I said it yesterday in an analyst call, this is probably having the potential to be the best news for treatment-resistant schizophrenia patients since clozapine was approved in the late 80s. And you have to know that clozapine is the only drug that is formally approved to treatment-resistant schizophrenic patients. So they are desperately looking for an alternative treatment and additional benefits.
Is this a treatment that people would have to stay on permanently?
Yeah, it's a small molecule. We have a drug that you take orally twice a day. And yes, that would be for lifelong. All those treatments for schizophrenia are lifelong. So far, we are not able to cure the disease. What we are trying is to put these neurotransmitters in the brain back into a reasonable balance. But given that we do not know the exact cause of schizophrenia, like we do not know the cause of Parkinson's or Alzheimer's yet, we are working and we are spending a lot of money on it. But that is really the next key step. We need to understand what is really causing those diseases. Now, the exciting thing we see about our results, and the next thing is that we will have to disclose the 1-year results. What it seems to be is a slow, permanent improvement, which goes from day 1 to the end of 6 months. And if this should go on till the end of 1 year and perhaps even beyond, then we might have a situation that this drug, evenamide, by its glutamatergic mechanism, is able to balance or put in balance again the neurotransmitters in the brain by reducing the excessive release of glutamate. And if that happens, I wouldn't call it a cure, but it seems almost like a healing of the patient or taking him to a level where he is no longer having the psychotic episodes. And that would be a fantastic outcome for those patients for who today there's practically nowhere to go but clozapine.
Do you get to interact with any of the patients and hear any of their stories as to what this is doing for them?
This thing in clinical development that we are the sponsor, it means we are paying for the study, but obviously the study is performed by the investigators. So we are kept for all good reasons, we are kept from talking to patients and having direct interactions. We should not bias the study. We are just practically the sponsor, as it is technically called. So it's better for us not to talk to patients. What we do get, though, is the feedback from the investigators. So those doctors who are seeing the patients and writing reports. So these studies are obviously blinded. That means we will not get any results about one patient. We do not know if he's on drug, at which dose he is. And also the doctors in this very specific study, they do not know on which dose of the drug the patient is. So this is what we call a radar-blinded study.
Although it must be good for you as a company to see the positive benefits that it's bringing.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what people are in for this industry. Yes, sure, you want to make a living. But if you get into this industry, there's so many hits you have to take to get to one success that you will not find anybody who's just doing it for the money. People want to see the good being done in that disease. There's plenty of people who have worked a lifetime to find a medication for disease and have not succeeded. Now, the people in Newron are fortunate insofar as the first drug that we developed has been taken to the market. And now after a few hits that we had as well, the next one, evenamide, that might be the next one because we are again in the phase 3 study phase already. so in the last phase of clinical development. So our team might well experience a second drug coming to the market, and that would be just outstanding.
Next week, you're headed to California for the JPM event. If you could tell me about that, what the reasons for going and the benefits of that event.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion ongoing again and again. San Francisco, the beginning of third week of January, that is the mecca for biotech and pharma. Everybody is going there that week in order to meet people. It's technically called JPM, but only the small fraction of companies is really attending that JPM conference. There's plenty of conferences surrounding there, being arranged around that JPM. But the true matter is it is not really a conference that you attend or a presentation that you listen to. It is really that you know that everybody from the industry will be there and everybody will be represented at senior level. So unlike a number of partnering conferences where you will only find the junior people, the JPM event is really taking decision makers to San Francisco. And you can schedule, let's say on a good day, you can have 10 meetings. It might only be 30 minutes. It might be in a rush between this meeting and the next meeting. It might be raining outside. But you meet the right people and you can talk to those people pretty open. And that is something we experienced the last 2 years because it was more or less virtual. Yes, you can have more video conferences a day when you don't have to run from hotel A to a hotel B to meeting room C. But you're missing the personal interaction. And that's why I'm absolutely sure everybody will be back there again, even if the cost of this event, just attending it, paying 5 days for a hotel, even if you need it only for 2 days, paying for food that you will never eat in a meeting room, that is horrendous. But everybody is still complaining and going there the next day. That's what JPM is all about in biotech and pharma. We'll be there.
What are your hopes for the meeting for Newron?
Yeah, we always look for a number of different characters to see there. Obviously, investors will be there. All the key pharma companies, and that is very important to us this year. We are actively looking for somebody to partner on our schizophrenia compound. Because being such a huge market, a working drug, an approved drug will generate more than $1 billion sales by principle in schizophrenia. So you must have a partner who has the sales force machinery in order to commercialize the drug. We would still want to keep part of a market or a niche indication for ourselves to commercialize it. But again, we will need a partner. And I guess it is now about the time to find the right partner, at least for some key territories, be it Asia, be it Europe. But it could also be for a global transaction if it works out. And again, you meet decision makers in San Francisco, so it's good to be there and get a first physical impression, talking to the right people and starting a partnering process. Investors, pharma companies, other companies might be even your competitors, so you talk to each other where you are, what you're doing, what are your intentions. It might be new people that you want to attract to join your company. And it will be analysts who are spreading the word about a very good new compound coming to the market. So that is the key intentions.
Once you get back, what's the plan for the company for 2023? What are you looking forward to in the next year?
Yeah, I think what is really crucial this year is, Jim, that after seeing those 6 weeks results, safety and efficacy in treatment-resistant schizophrenia, being followed by the 6 months result just yesterday, I'm really thrilled to see the 1-year results. If we could show that our patients, treatment resistant, that means they won't benefit from any treatment on the market, but our drug being given to them, they have a sustained and improved and perhaps even statistically significant benefit after 1 year. That is exactly what all those patients are looking for, the doctors are looking for, and also the government agencies are looking for who have to pay for a new drug. So the 1-year results of that, then we want to have results from the phase 3 study, the pivotal study in the other indication, those patients who are not yet treatment resistant on schizophrenia. That will report later this year as well. Then what I would like to do is add another drug to our pipeline, again, a CNS drug, something that we can invest into and create some value to enhance our pipeline again and to have the next compound to work on. That would make it a fantastic year.
And that's it for another podcast. Over the next week or so, I'll be trying to ramp it up back to 3 interviews per show, which shouldn't take too long. There's definitely lots of news to feature already, that's for sure. So it's nice to be off and running again. Hopefully the rain here stops soon. We had one day between Christmas and New Year where the river burst its banks and the village was cut off for a few hours. So that's been our excitement for the month. It will definitely be nice to see the sun again. There needs to be a conference somewhere nice and warm and fairly close for us all to go to at this time of year. Or I guess I could just do what the snowbirds in Canada do when they head south for the winter, and I could just go and work in the Canary Islands for a month. Not sure how that would go down with the family though. Anyway, it's been a good start to the new year. Thanks a lot for joining us this time, and I hope wherever in the world you are that you have a great week ahead. Take care and join us next week for another Beyond Biotech.